Sri Lanka has lost the support of the like-minded. We have lost conspicuously the support of Latin America. And I do not mean only those countries of Latin America which traditionally vote with the United States. I mean those countries of Latin America which have very progressive stands on human rights, and also very progressive and robust stands on national sovereignty, such as Brazil, such as Uruguay. And none of those countries have the infamous Tamil diaspora presence in them. There are no Tamil voters in Brazil, let me assure you. So it's not the commercial relationship with the United States that made Uruguay switch from supporting Sri Lanka to voting against. There is a correlation between the growing but still latent invocation of arguments of cultural relativism on the part of the Sri Lankan state representatives, on the part of our dominant discourse, and the shedding or subtraction of our friends in the global south. In the global south. Because our strategy was, in fact, to balance off our natural constituency, the global south, not the east, against the global north. We have started losing conspicuously in 2012 and 2013 our support precisely among our natural constituency, the global south. And it must be remembered, ladies and gentlemen, that the United Nations Human Rights Council has a permanent, I repeat, a permanent, you may call it structural majority drawn from the Asia Pacific, Africa, and Latin America. 34 members of a 47-member council are from those three groups. And in 2009, we got 29 of the 34. Now, the number of countries, the countries themselves change, but there is a 72% built-in Asia, Pacific, Africa, Latin America block vote in the Human Rights Council. The question we have to ask ourselves is how we have lost from among that constituency. And I believe that that is because our attitude to human rights is only a subset of a larger mentality manifested in an ideology, even in a doctrine, which has been dominant in the post-war years. And it is that doctrine, that ideology, that mindset that has brought us to the dead end that we are facing in Geneva and in the larger global arena. Now, this does not make the efforts of the West right. It does not even mean that they cannot be resisted. But if there's one message that I would like us to ponder, it is that the best, and I might say the only way in which Western double standards, hypocrisy, and hegemonism can be resisted is by a robust national commitment and practice of human rights taken in their universalist sense by the target country. We must have the basic intellectual and political honesty to ask ourselves certain questions. One question is, if it is simply a matter of Western interventionism, why is it that the West has not been able to do this to Cuba? Now, it is not that Cuba has some kind of ideal human rights situation, but almost none of the charges that are leveled, however hypocritically, however falsely, at Sri Lanka, can even be mustered against Cuba. There have not been any disappearances in Cuba. People are not shot at demonstrations. Their heads are not smashed in when they are taking shelter in churches. As happened in Valiveria, Rathapassala. In case anybody thought that I was not going to mention the specific incident. So Cuba has shown, most recently in its vote in the General Assembly, because every year it brings a resolution against the United States. And now it has become almost a game, because every year their vote keeps growing. And this year they got 188 votes and the United States got 2, including the United States. So much for the argument that our Minister of External Affairs makes, that it is because the United States moved the resolutions in 2012 and 2013 that Sri Lanka lost, because the United States has all these bilateral relationships with countries which then vote accordingly in the Human Rights Council. Then how did the Cubans win in the General Assembly? How did Palestine gain admission to UNESCO at the time that I served there, and I was part of that battle? How did the Palestinians, who don't even have a country of their own, succeed when President Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton personally campaigned against the admission of Palestine because they felt very threatened electorally by Prime Minister Netanyahu's political lobbying, even of the Congress and the House of Representatives and the Senate in the United States. The US threatened, and made good on the threat later, by the way, to cut off funds to UNESCO. Palestine needed a 2/3 majority to get into the UNESCO, and I say we because I was also part of that group, we got much more than 2/3. So it can be done. But it can be done only if you have a relatively clean human rights record, or, like Burma, Myanmar, you have cleaned up your Human Rights Act, however bad it has been. Now we haven't done that either. Therefore, while the West has been and is being hypocritical, I might even say aggressive, in its prosecution of the case against Sri Lanka has made itself vulnerable by failing to do what we can and what our own experts, our own distinguished retired civil servants have urged us to do, as with the recommendations of the Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission. Now, we are told by the state that these things take time and require space. Well, we've had time and space. We've had a couple of years, and I really don't know how much time and space it takes to appoint an independent inquiry to inquire into those specific incidents that the LLRC has listed. The LLRC, in a brilliant long chapter, has gone through the arguments concerning international humanitarian law and stated very clearly that at no time did the Sri Lankan Armed Forces have a policy of willfully targeting Tamil civilians, still less a policy which amounted to genocide or quasi-genocide. But the LLRC also lists a number of quite specific incidents where it says, on the surface of it, it would appear that crimes have been committed. And they've called for the institution of an independent inquiry. Now, we have not done that. Surely, there are people of eminence, such as Justice Veeramantri, who could head up such a commission. And even if age does not permit him to do so, he could be asked to nominate distinguished Sri Lankans who could constitute such an independent inquiry. Now, if we do not hold our own independent inquiry into a specific number of egregious violations, then we open ourselves up to a broad gauge imposition on what is known as the last days of the war, which of course is wholly hypocritical and ridiculous, because it was a 30-year war, and where were these people who were criticizing Sri Lanka when bombs were going off and school kids were getting blown up on commuter buses? They went around.